Outback Stories.
Outback Stories celebrates the pioneering spirit of Australia. It makes little difference if your family came on the First Fleet or on a leaky boat last week. Our unique national identity was born and bred in the outback. These are your stories.
Much of our national identity was forged during the second half of the 19th century when Australia experienced an economic boom ride led by the cattle and sheep industries. At the time, the majority of Australians lived and worked in what we call the bush. Woods, or forests, just didn't sound right.
The bush, especially in the outback, that place beyond the Black Stump, near the Never Never, and just a few 100 miles past Bullamakanka, was home territory to us drovers.
The cattle industry began in the 1830s, when herds of cattle and sheep ate their way across the continent to be fattened up for colonial markets. Many of the tracks they used became well worn and, in fact, are still used today.
Store cattle from the Langy, the mob goes trailing past, with 1/2 mile of sandhill twixt the leaders and the last. The nags that move behind them, broad-chested, tanned and tall, the bravest hearts amongst us and the lightest hands of all. Oh, let 'em wade in wonga grass and taste the wonga dew, and let them spread those 1,000 head, for we've been droven too.
The long-distance drovers, or overlanders, were responsible for large mobs of cattle which were moved from the home station stockyards along the droving routes and eventually to sale yards or transport links. Sitting high on their horses, the drovers were forever on watch as they moved the cattle along specific stock routes, sometimes crossing colonial and territorial boundaries. Cattle drovers developed the habit of counting their herd. It was a good discipline and helped the endless days pass. Sheep are harder to count and are usually done every 3 or 4 days. One old method suggested carrying a pocketful of small pebbles and count the sheep in batches of 20, putting a pebble in the opposite pocket as the count proceeded. A standard joke was to say, "I still reckon the best method to count a flock was to count the number of legs and divide by 4. S. Kidman and Co., established in 1899 by the cattle king, Sir Sidney Kidman, and his brother Sackville, remains one of Australia's largest beef producers. The drover, although a stockman, has particular skills which are used to ensure the well-being of the herd, especially in regular grazing and clean water. He has to be part veterinarian, dog trainer, cattle whisperer, expert horseman, good with a stock whip, and have a temperament that ensures his herd lasted on long, lonely journeys across some of the fiercest, roughest country on earth. Mobs on the move must pass through vast station properties where area is measured by the 1,000 square miles. Before crossing each boundary, the drover is obliged to give notice to the station manager so the home cattle could be moved from the stock route. This was no mean feat before the days of two-way radio and today's mobile phone. The long paddock is the colloquial term for the stock routes that cross Australia, open stretches of unfenced land that anyone can use to feed and move stock in times of drought. One famously follows the Cobb Highway, named for the famous coach company, from Echuca-Moama on the Victorian border through to Wilcannia, leading to the outback towns of Burke, Broken Hill and White Cliffs. Another is the Canning Stock Route that runs from Halls Creek in the Kimberley region of Western Australia till Wiluna in the mid-western region. With a total distance of around 1,850 kilometres, 1,150 miles, it is the longest historic stock route in the world.
Oh, cattle are clever, dead crafty. You know the noise they ordinarily make going along a road? Well, you'd think you could hear 'em if they were anywheres near you, wouldn't you? Do you know? I've known 'em steal past me in a camp not 20 yards away, and me not hear 'em. It's the truth. After I've camped at night, I've known 'em to steal away on their bloody toes. Yeah, on the tips of their toes. It must have been, just like men. But when I used to hear that moo, 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 I'd know it was time to get off my arse and go after 'em.
Old-time droving was hard but proud work. Men lived on the track, cooked and slept under the stars, and probably dreamt of better times. Day and night they had to be responsible for their herds. There's no days off for the old-time drover. The days were long, often 16 hours in the saddle.
They were usually a mixed bunch of blokes, black, white and brindle, and skilled with the ways of cattle. It was their job to ensure that they took the mob and returned with the full complement, and occasionally a few extras.
First Australians have a proud history as drovers and stockmen. Many stations employed the same drovers every year. They would disappear after delivering their mob and mysteriously reappear when the stock routes began to dry out at the end of the rainy season. Others were employed full-time, alternating their work between general station stockman's duties and the annual droving trip.
There's joy to be out in the life of a drover. I reckon it's a bugger of a life sometimes, but there's real joy to be had. It's in me blood.
It wasn't unusual for 2 or even 3 herds to meet, especially if near a watering bore. Cattle brands were important, and part of the drover's skill was in knowing all the leading brands. Separating the herds, often 4,000 or 5,000 cattle, was a challenge, especially hard work for the dogs. Drovers knew full well not to get in the way of thirsty cattle, for the beasts easily stampede at the whiff of water. At times like this, the herd needed to be tightly contained, reassured, and led steadily to the water source. Water bores, especially the great artesian basin, are vital to the stock routes. Some of them deliver boiling hot water and need drains to allow the water to cool. A hot bath is a special treat for dry, dusty drovers. The drovers breakfast by starlight.
In the really tough times, when rations were low, us men had a drover's breakfast. A spit, a smoke, a fart, and a good look round.
Before sunup, a horseman rides out in front of the mob. Others move to the flank. Two follow up to heel the stragglers. The drovers make a noise, a shout to the dogs, a whistle. The mob leaders drift out after the front horseman. The mob is on the move, heads tossing, voices lowing, a cattle chorus, and dust rising from 10,000 hooves. Feeding as they go, the cattle spread a red surging wave over 1/2 mile of the stock route. Their progress is steady, for the good drover is not a whip-cracking cowboy of Hollywood film. To move cattle too quick robs them of their condition. Some cattle are ornery, others remain calm, but during the first days on the road, all cattle require careful watching.
Have you ever been droven out west, where the flies are a terrible pest? And the mosquitoes at night, by Jesus they bite, and the bulldog ants in your blankets at night. By the Jesus you know, you're earning your dough when you take on droving out west.
They move all day, man and dog, keeping a careful eye for strays. The drover's dog is a trusty friend and fellow worker. It is said a typical drover would gladly give his last drop of water to his horse and dog. Late afternoon, the drovers rest the herd and prepare a campfire and a hearty meal. The larger camps have a cook and general hand travelling with the plant. Yesterday's drover supped on tinned beef stew, damper, tinned fruit and custard, and copious mugs of hot, sweet tea. After the meal, a smoke and a yarn. Possibly someone would recite a poem or sing a song as the campfire crackled and warmed the chilly air.
Hurrah for the old stock saddle boys, hurrah for the stock whip too, hurrah for the baldy pony boys to carry me westward ho, to carry me westward ho, me boys, that's where the cattle stray, on the Farbagoo and the Flinders too, 1,000 miles away. So give your horses rein across the open plain, we'll crack our whips like thunderbolts, no care what.
After sundown begins the night watch. The boss drover first, and his companions following at 2 hourly stretches. The watchers ride night horses, mounts that have been specially trained for night work. The cattle settle down, jaws chewing the cud, their voices quieten. Some stand staring at the fire, not 15 yards distant. The men are careful not to move between fire and beast. The night watch riders often sing to the cattle to reassure them they are under care. Some drovers play harmonica or tin whistle, always careful to retain quietness. There's also a watchful ear on the lookout for dingoes. The last thing the drover needs is a stampede of confused, panicked cattle. A droving trip could be a week or a matter of months. In a country where drought is a frequent visitor, cattle and sheep must be moved, must be fed and watered as they move ever onwards to their final destination. It is only then that the drover can relax, even if only until the next assignment.
He'd been 18 months on the road, with the brown mare following him, without a lead rein, like a dog, over thousands of miles of desert, choked with dust, tormented by flies. The casual way he spoke of his trip amazed all of us. To him, it seemed nothing to boast about.
Australia is a big country, and in retrospect, our sheep and beef industries have a remarkable history of achievement, all made possible by the skill and determination of men, and now women, who wear broad hats and are called drovers.